She looked at him and whispered, "I'm too old for love, my heart doesn't believe anymore." The cowboy swallowed hard, eyes burning, and said the words no one had ever said to her before. "Then I've waited my whole life for you." What happened next shattered every rule about age, fear, and second chances. Right finger if you believe love can arrive late, but right on time. Hit subscribe now. This story will stay with you long after the end. The wind moved gently across the Wyoming plains that evening, brushing against the tall grass like a whisper from the past, and Clara Whitmore stood on the porch of her small ranch house with her arms folded tightly around herself, not because of the cold, but because memories had a way of sneaking in when the world went quiet. At 58, she had learned how to survive alone, how to wake before dawn, feed the horses, mend broken fences, and drink her coffee in silence without expecting anyone to sit across from her. Love, she believed, was something meant for younger people, people who hadn't already been broken once, or twice, or so completely that the idea of starting again felt foolish. She had buried her husband 12 years earlier, buried her dreams with him, and told herself that loneliness was simply the price of endurance. That was the night the stranger rode in. His horse appeared first beyond the fence line, dark against the amber sky, moving slow and steady like he wasn't in a hurry to arrive anywhere. Clara noticed him because she always noticed movement. Living alone made a person observant. When the rider came closer, she could see he was younger, maybe mid-30s, broad-shouldered, dust clinging to his jeans, his hat tilted low. He dismounted carefully, respectfully, as though he already knew this land belonged to someone who didn't appreciate trouble. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice calm, warm, nothing pushy about it. "Name's Luke Carter. My truck broke down a mile back. Thought I'd ask if you had a phone or maybe a bit of water." Clara studied him the way life had taught her to, not unkindly, but guarded. She had learned that charm often came before disappointment. Still, something in his eyes held no hunger, no expectation. "Water's fine," she said. "Phone's inside." She turned without waiting, certain he'd follow only if he was decent, and he did, keeping his distance as though afraid to cross an invisible line. As she poured him water, she noticed his hands, scarred, hard-working hands, and the way he kept glancing toward the old photo frame near the window, her and her late husband, younger, smiling, before time had taken its toll. "You live out here alone?" Luke asked gently. "Yes," she replied, sharper than intended. "And I prefer it that way." He nodded. "I understand that more than you'd think." His truck couldn't be fixed that night. The sun had already dipped low, coyotes beginning their distant calls. Against her better judgment, and because the storm clouds rolling in reminded her too much of the night she'd lost her husband, she offered him the old bunkhouse. "One night," she said firmly. "You leave in the morning." Luke smiled faintly. "That's all I need. But one night has a way of turning into conversations by lantern light, into shared meals eaten quietly but comfortably, into laughter that surprises both people because neither expects it." Luke didn't flirt, didn't push. He spoke about ranch work he'd done drifting from place to place, about a mother who'd died young, about a life that never quite rooted anywhere. Clara found herself talking too, about grief, about fear, about how the world slowly convinces a woman she's invisible once her hair turns silver. "I'm too old for love," she said one night without meaning to. That chapter's closed. Luke looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Maybe for some people," he said softly. "But not for you." She laughed, bitter. "You're kind. But you're young. You'll understand someday." "I already do," he replied. "Because I've been waiting my whole life for something that felt real. And this feels real." The words frightened her more than loneliness ever had. She pulled away after that, colder, stricter, reminding him of boundaries. Yet fate has a cruel sense of humor. When Luke's truck parts were delayed, days passed. Then weeks. And with each sunrise, Clara felt something awaken that she had buried long ago, hope, dangerous and beautiful all at once. But just when her heart began to soften, the truth arrived in the form of a stranger from town, and a secret Luke had never planned to share. Because Luke Carter hadn't come to Wyoming by accident. And Clara was never supposed to fall in love with him. The change in Clara began quietly, the way all dangerous things do, not with thunder but with comfort. Luke fixed the loose hinge on the barn door without being asked. He rose before dawn and helped with the horses as if he'd always belonged there. Sometimes she caught herself watching him from the kitchen window, the steam from her coffee curling in front of her face while he worked beneath the early sun, and the sight unsettled her because it felt familiar, too familiar, like grief reopening itself in a different shape. She scolded herself for it, reminding her heart of its age, its scars, its responsibilities, but the heart never listened. Luke never mentioned love again. Instead, he offered presence. And that, she discovered, was far more dangerous. They shared quiet evenings by the fire, speaking of small things, weather, cattle prices, old songs on the radio, until one night a truck pulled into the yard, headlights cutting across the porch like a blade. Clara stiffened immediately. Visitors were rare, and rarely welcome. A tall man stepped out, city boots unsuited for dust, jacket too clean for ranch land. He introduced himself as Nathan Hale, said he was from the county land office, and that he was following up on a property dispute involving Whitmore Ranch. Clara's stomach tightened. "There's no dispute," she said sharply. "This land's been in my family nearly 40 years. Nathan hesitated, eyes flicking briefly toward Luke before returning to her. "There's been a claim filed," he said carefully, "regarding mineral rights beneath the eastern ridge." Clara turned slowly toward Luke, confusion flashing into suspicion. Luke met her gaze, jaw tightening, just slightly, and that small movement told her everything. A truth existed here, and it was not on her side. After Nathan left, silence swallowed the house. The fire popped once, loud in the stillness. "You want to explain why a county official looked at you like he already knew your name?" Clara asked. Luke stood near the door, hat in his hands. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "I didn't come here to hurt you," he said. "That's not an explanation." He exhaled slowly. "I work for a development group. Or I did. They sent me to evaluate land rumors. I didn't know it was yours when I arrived. I swear that part." Her chest tightened painfully. "So you were spying on me?" "No," he said quickly. "Not after I met you. I stayed because of you. I quit the job 2 weeks ago. You stayed under my roof," she whispered, voice shaking, knowing someone might try to take my land. Luke stepped forward. "I was trying to protect you. They'll come whether I'm here or not." The betrayal didn't explode, it sank. Quietly, deeply, like a stone dropped into still water. "You should leave," she said. "Clara." Now. He left before dawn. Days passed. Then weeks. The ranch felt heavier without him, every chore reminding her of shared silence, of laughter she had not meant to enjoy. She told herself anger was easier than longing, but anger faded faster than grief ever had. Then the letters began. Legal threats. Purchase offers disguised as kindness. Pressure. When Clara finally drove into town to confront the land office, she found Luke waiting outside, hat in hand, eyes weary. "I told them no," he said. "They won't stop." "Why are you here?" she demanded. "Because I love you," he said simply. "And because I've waited my whole life for something worth losing everything for." Her breath caught, not with hope, but with fear. Because loving him now meant risking her home, her safety, her heart. And the worst twist was still coming. Carter was not just a former scout for a development group. He was the son of the man leading it. The truth did not arrive loudly. It settled into Clara's chest like winter, slow, numbing, impossible to escape. Luke's father. The man whose signature appeared at the bottom of every threatening letter. The man whose company now circled her land like vultures. When she learned, it wasn't from Luke himself, but from a clerk at the county office who spoke his name too casually, too knowingly. Carter Developments. Carter Holdings. Carter Land Acquisition. The same Carter. She drove back to the ranch in silence, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. The house greeted her with familiar stillness, but it no longer felt safe. It felt watched. Memories pressed in on her, her husband's laughter, his promise that the land would always protect her if she protected it. She had believed him. Now she wasn't so sure. Luke came that evening, walking instead of riding, as though approaching on foot might soften the truth. She stood on the porch and didn't invite him in. "You should have told me," she said before he could speak. "I wanted to," he replied. "Every day. But I was afraid once you knew who my father was, you'd never look at me the same." And you were right. The words hurt them both. "I'm not him," Luke said. "I left because of him. Because he destroys everything he touches, land, people, families. And yet here he is," she said bitterly, "taking mine." Luke stepped closer. Let me fight him. She shook her head. You already did. And you lost. That night, the eviction notice arrived, preliminary, legal, polite in its cruelty. 30 days. Appeals possible. Outcomes uncertain. Clara sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the paper until the letters blurred. For the first time since her husband's death, fear wrapped fully around her. Luke tried everything, lawyers, documents, even confronting his father face to face. He returned bruised once, lip split, eyes burning with rage. He said you'd sell eventually, Luke told her. He always wins. Clara looked at him then, really looked, and understood something devastating. Loving him didn't protect her. It endangered her. So she made the hardest choice of her life. I want you to go, she said quietly. Luke froze. What? Leave Wyoming. Leave me. He won't stop while you're here. That won't protect you. It might, she said. And I can live with losing land. I can't live with losing you because of me. Tears filled his eyes. I've waited my whole life for you. She swallowed the ache rising in her throat. And I've already lived mine. He left at dawn again, this time without hope of return. The weeks after were empty in a way grief hadn't prepared her for. Not loud pain, just absence. The land grew quiet. Even the horses seemed restless. She began packing slowly, preparing for the possibility that she would lose everything she had built. Then one morning, a call came. The development project had been halted. Temporarily. A legal injunction filed by an anonymous party. Clara stared at the phone long after the line went dead, heart pounding. 3 days later, Luke returned, thinner, tired, but standing taller somehow. I turned against him publicly, he said. Released documents. Testified. I burned every bridge I had. She whispered his name. I don't want you to choose me out of pity, he continued. Or fear. I just need you to know, I didn't wait my whole life to walk away. She stepped forward then, tears finally falling. I said I was too old for love. He touched her cheek gently. Love doesn't care about age. It only cares about courage. But even as hope returned, one final truth remained: the case wasn't over. And the cost of winning might be higher than either of them imagined. The courtroom smelled of old wood and colder intentions. Clara sat stiffly on the hard bench, hands folded in her lap, listening as strangers debated the worth of her life as if it were numbers on a ledger. Acres, minerals, market value. No one spoke of dawns she had greeted alone, of winters survived by grit and prayer, of a husband buried beneath the cottonwood tree on the ridge. To them, the ranch was property. To her, it was memory made solid. Luke sat several rows behind her. They hadn't spoken since he returned. Not because they didn't want to, but because words now felt too fragile to touch. His father entered last. William Carter did not look like a villain. He never had. He wore a tailored suit, silver hair perfectly combed, expression calm and confident. He nodded at lawyers who rose when he passed, men who owed him favors, money, or fear. When his eyes met Luke's, they did not soften. They hardened. The proceedings dragged on for days. Testimony blurred together until Clara could no longer separate hope from exhaustion. When her turn came to speak, her voice trembled at first, then steadied. This land isn't just soil, she said. It's the last promise my husband ever made to me. You can take it, but you can't tell me it means nothing. Even the judge looked down then. But corporations did not bend for emotion. On the final afternoon, the ruling was delayed. More review. More waiting. Weeks, possibly months. Clara left the courthouse hollow, unsure whether she was relieved or defeated. That night, Luke didn't return to the motel. The sheriff came instead. There'd been an accident on the highway, a single truck collision near the old canyon bend. The vehicle had been registered to Luke. Clara's world went silent. She drove through the night, headlights shaking across the road as panic clawed through her chest. At the hospital, time fractured. Machines beeped. Nurses spoke gently. Someone said, stable, another said, internal injuries, and none of it made sense except one terrible thought repeating again and again. I sent him away once. I won't survive it again. Luke lay pale beneath white sheets, bruised and broken but breathing. She took his hand without hesitation, age forgotten, pride meaningless. I'm here, she whispered. I'm not leaving again. When he woke 2 days later, she was still there. You stayed, he murmured. I was wrong, she said softly. About being too old. About protecting myself. Love doesn't ask permission. Tears slipped down his temple. I thought I'd lost you. You nearly did, she replied. Don't ever disappear without fighting to come back. Recovery was slow. During that time, something unexpected happened. News outlets picked up the story, the aging widow facing eviction, the estranged son standing against a corporate empire, the small ranch refusing to disappear quietly. Public opinion shifted. Pressure mounted. Then came the letter. Not from the court. From William Carter. He withdrew the claim. No apology. No explanation. Only a single sentence handwritten at the bottom. Some battles cost more than land. The ranch was saved. But victory didn't feel loud. It felt tender. Fragile. Like something that could still break if handled carelessly. Months later, spring returned. Grass softened the plains. Clara and Luke stood together beneath the cottonwood tree where her husband rested. I don't want to replace your past, Luke said gently. You couldn't, she answered. But you've given my future a voice again. She looked at him, truly looked, not as a young man, not as a sacrifice, not as a mistake. But as love. I said I was too old for love, she whispered. He smiled softly. And I said I waited my whole life for you. This time, she believed them both. In. One morning months later, Clara stood at the porch watching Luke work the fence line. She realized she no longer measured her age by years lost, but by mornings gained. She had once believed love belonged to the young. Now she knew better. Love belonged to the brave. And when the cowboy finally looked up and smiled at her, not waiting, not chasing, just present, Clara smiled back, knowing the truth at last. Some hearts don't meet early. They meet when both are strong enough to stay.